The use of metrics in research assessment is a complicated and contested topic. That's why the outcomes of the independent review of the use of metrics in research assessment have been so long awaited. A few days before the publication of the review's report, I caught up with the chair of the steering group, Professor James Wilsden, to find out more about the findings and the implications for the sector. You've chosen the title The Metric Tide for your report. Why did you choose that title, and what does it tell us about the state of metrics for research assessment today?
Well, as you say, metrics are a topic that evoke quite sharp and differing reactions across the higher education and research sector, and we chose the title The Metric Tide to reflect the fact that there are all these different currents swirling around that make metrics more important and more hotly debated than ever before. We see greater pressure from government to account in greater detail for public spending on research. We see more sophisticated regimes of audit and evaluation, both from outside through the REF and other mechanisms, and also within universities themselves. University managers want more sophisticated and strategic tools for intelligently managing their research portfolio. And universities are, of course, in a more competitive environment than before, driven in part by university rankings and league tables. Alongside all of that, you've got greater possibilities for the data itself. The whole notion of big data and its application back on our own enterprises' research is still at a relatively early stage, but there's clearly lots of quite exciting ways in which new technologies, new tools, new platforms can be applied to research to better capture and track in real time and in a richer, more sophisticated way the multiple qualities and impacts of research.
A key theme of the report is responsible metrics. What does this mean for you?
Well, we settled on this idea of responsible metrics in part because there's been at a European and at a UK level more discussion over the past 3-4 years about the idea of responsible research and innovation. We found that quite a rich and helpful framework for applying to some of the specific debates around metrics. In talking about responsible metrics, what we're trying to convey is the need for metrics that are robust, that capture and convey the most accurate data possible, but which are also humble in terms of recognising the limitations of any one indicator and indeed of multiple indicators to capture the full richness and diversity of what's going on across the system. We also want to convey the notion of transparency, the importance that needs to be placed on making data sets open and easy for those that are being audited to interrogate and adapt the systems that are being used to measure what they're doing. And finally, that the metrics should support concerns over diversity and equality. So diversity both in terms of types of research, for example, metrics which protect and nurture interdisciplinary fields, but also diversity across the research system in terms of researcher careers. We had particular concerns through the review around early career researchers, around gender issues, and the need for metrics that help improve the situation in respect of equality and diversity rather than worsen it.
What will this mean in practice for universities, funders and others?
Well, we've made 20 quite specific and targeted recommendations in the report aimed at different actors in the system, including the leadership of HEIs. I think that the headline for HEIs is that we want the university sector to take more ownership and control of this agenda. Metrics are neither inherently good nor inherently bad. They're something that we can use, that we can shape to help create and steer the kind of research system that we want. And I think there's been too much of a passive acceptance of the growing power of some of these indicators and metrics in the system, rather than universities and others taking ownership and helping to steer the way these are used. So we say, for example, that universities should set out much clearer, more transparent and more widely discussed strategies at an institutional level for the way in which they use quantitative indicators in their own management systems, that those systems can draw on other guidelines that are out there, like DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, but also, importantly, adapt those generic principles to the specific institutional context that exists for different universities. And of course, universities differ widely in terms of the range of purposes, the mix of missions that they reflect. Indicators should also reflect that. They need to be contextualized.
Your report makes it clear that metrics couldn't replace peer review in the next research excellence framework. Do you foresee a time when it may be possible for metrics to completely replace peer review?
To be honest, we can't in terms of the current way in which the REF works, the range of purposes that the REF serves through the system, and the sophistication, the nuance of expert judgment that's brought to bear on the research system through the REF process. There are, of course, simpler, more algorithmic ways in which you could allocate QR money, but if we want a system that does what the REF does, there's no easy like-for-like replacement of metrics for peer review that we currently envisage. That said, we do see ways in which data can further enrich the REF process, both in the next cycle, assuming that's 2020, and in subsequent cycles beyond that. And we make some quite detailed recommendations on ways in which all of the possibilities of quantitative indicators can be more intelligently and sensitively incorporated into the REF, while still preserving the primacy of peer review and expert judgment in the operation of the evaluation process.
You talk about the dangers of management by metrics and the increasing use of rankings and institutional league tables. What are your concerns?
Well, I think with league tables and rankings, again, it's a classic example of where the sector has, in a sense, outsourced some really critical questions about strategy, direction, management to often opaque, poorly constructed in terms of the rigour of the rankings themselves, and unaccountable league tables. So, these league tables, they didn't exist 25 years ago. They've come very quickly to assume an enormous significance in the sector, and yet we as a sector allow them to be done to us rather than shaping the way in which they're done. So I think there's really important opportunities to apply some of these broader principles about responsible metrics to the future development of those systems. Some I think are better than others. I mean, we say in the report the Times Higher Education rankings have at least been opened up to consultation over the past year as they seek to refine them. Others are black boxed, as we say in the report. It's very hard to really understand quite what's going on in terms of weighting and the balance of different indicators that are being used. And also many rankings are being gamed. I mean, we see many examples internationally and indeed here in the UK of strategic behaviours in response to league tables where universities are allowing their direction to be influenced and shaped by the league table rather than deciding what they want to achieve as an institution and then allowing the league table to reflect that. And I think that's fundamentally wrong-headed. It's the wrong way. We shouldn't be allowing, league table producers to determine the direction of the higher education sector.
Journal impact factors are widely used but strongly criticised. What's your position on them?
Well, we say in the report that journal impact factors indeed have come to assume huge importance in many aspects of research management and assessment, and yet the robustness of them as an indicator is highly debated and indeed dubious in many respects. So we think far too much weight is being placed on GIFs at all levels of the system in terms of decisions around recruitment and promotion inside universities, in terms of assumptions about the weight of GIFs in something like the REF. I mean, although HEFCE's been very clear it doesn't want to see GIFs featuring as a factor, we know anecdotally that at the HEI level they weigh heavy in decisions around which outputs should and shouldn't be submitted. So that is creating a lot of perverse and negative effects in the research system in terms of forcing researchers to pursue particular publication paths, choking up the research system by reinforcing the power of high impact journals at the expense of others, and the longer term effects of that are going to be even more corrosive of the kind of diverse, vibrant research system that we want to see. So we think GIFs need to be firmly put back in their box. They're not entirely useless. They do have some value for publishers as a way of understanding the role of a particular journal, but even there, in terms of how journals are marketed, we say they should be used alongside 5 or 6 other indicators to give you a much more rounded sense of the particular value and significance of any given journal in a particular field. So yeah, GIFs have come to be a really toxic tip of the sort of metric. It's a mixed metaphor with metric tide, but metrics have come to be, play a very toxic role in many respects in the research system, and we want to see that brought to an end.
If you could fix one problem with research metrics today or in the near future, what would it be, and how would you go about fixing it?
There's clearly huge potential in terms of the use of so-called big data within the research system, and we're seeing lots of more sophisticated ways in which data are being captured, and a lot of that's very beneficial in terms of improving our capacity to strategically manage the HEM research system. But we need those data sets to connect to one another far more efficiently. Interoperable data, as the phrase goes, is absolutely key. And so we say in the report that there needs to be ongoing work beyond the review to bring together the key players, HEFCE, the research councils, HESA, HEIs, JISC, etc., to continue working on how we make the most of data and indicators in the system, but also improve interoperable linkages between different data sets. This will be heightened, of course, if we end up capturing more data on the teaching side as well as on the research side, which is under discussion in terms of a TEF as well as a REF. We also think that there are certain underpinning bits of data architecture, if you like, the plumbing of the system that can be improved, and perhaps the best example of that is unique identifiers for researchers. And we say in the report that we're strong advocates and supporters of ORCID as a system of identifiers for researchers. We've already seen a big increase in the uptake of ORCID numbers across the UK and indeed other national research systems. We think that can go further. We think within the REF, the use of ORCID numbers should be mandated next time around, and in that way, alongside the efforts that Wellcome and the research councils are making to promote ORCID numbers, we can really sort out that piece of the data system so that every individual researcher has a clear identifier that links them as an individual to their papers, and it means that data through the system as a whole will improve much more rapidly than it otherwise would.